The remains of 11 victims of the Nigerian Church building collapse is undergoing DNA testing. They will arrive in the early hours of Friday morning. For the latest, we now cross to our reporter Chriselda Lewis live from the Waterkloof Airbase in Pretoria. Chriselda?
Well, a very good evening to you there, Tabile. The visual that you're seeing on your screen right now is exactly where the plane that is expecting to be carrying the remains of the 11 remaining South Africans coming from Nigeria. It's been a devastating 5-month wait for these families who are saying what they want is closure and also answers about what really happened at the Synagogue Church of All Nations when that guest house did collapse. What's the latest regarding to that? You would recall that earlier this week, the Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, did have a press conference about the latest developments, relating to the families and how they've been informed about what's expected to be taking place. We're expecting that aircraft to land at about 2 o'clock this morning. Certainly would be a relief for these families who've been waiting for so long for that closure. But just to get some clarity on exactly what time, if this plane will be landing at 2 o'clock, and if all the remaining South Africans, all 11 of them, are on that aircraft. I'm chatting now to the Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe. Thank you very much for your time, Minister. I think let's start first of all with whether this plane will be arriving at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, we can confirm that the 6130 South African Air Defence Force aircraft has left Lagos for South Africa. It will be landing in a matter of hours, probably about 11 this evening or 2 o'clock a.m., depending on the time that it takes to refuel in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But I can confirm that the 11 mortal remains of our compatriots who perished in Lagos when that synagogue church collapsed about 4 months ago will be brought back home, closing the chapter, this grueling chapter, highly emotional, especially for the families of the deceased.
Minister, when you held a press conference much earlier, you'd indicated that there was no clarity on exactly how many of the mortal remains would return. I want to talk about these 5 months and what the delay was. Yes, we know that you've been communicating that proper identification needs to be done. Let the viewer understand what this delay has been, 5 months for these mortal remains to return.
Let's go back to September when the synagogue church collapsed. It took almost 3 days before the rescue authorities went to the scene. So 3 days, you can imagine, with the climatic conditions of Nigeria, the temperatures being very high, the state of the bodies. Secondly, to identify our 81 South African compatriots out of 115 who had perished took time because we had to make sure that we contact families who knew that their relatives had gone to Nigeria. We had to contact travel agents and South African Airways to ensure that we can be able to coordinate this and check whether those people are there. So after doing all that, then we had to do DNA samples because in some instances we couldn't get proper fingerprints from the deceased. So all this time took time, but it was not within our authority as a South African government because it is within the jurisdiction of the state of Lagos, in Nigeria. So it has taken such a long time, but I think at the end we are satisfied that the Nigerian authorities did everything within their power to ensure that this process is expedited, that now today we can be able to ensure that the families can be able to receive their loved one so that they can make those final rites to bury them in dignity.
Minister, have all of them been informed that indeed all 11 will be, because some that we spoke to were quite worried that one of the families perhaps the remains would not return. Have they all been informed that indeed this chapter is coming to an end, as you say?
Well, the Department of Social Development, led by Minister Batabile Dlamini, has been in constant contact with all the families of the injured and the deceased since the time that our President Zuma initiated this process after hearing about this tragedy. We've been providing counseling sessions, treatment for those, and even providing necessities where it was required. It has been 4 months of full work, and I must thank both the President for initiating this IMC and also the net joins, those men and women in blue, the South African Police Service, our soldiers, men and women, officials and medical officers, forensic scientists, and the Department of Social Development and the Presidency and Department of a local government led by Pravin Gordhan. They did everything within our power to ensure that this process is done in military precision.
But certainly the work doesn't stop here now, Minister. We've got families who are going to receive their loved ones. Certainly they would need more counselling, given that their loved ones have now returned. But the healing process for them perhaps would only begin now.
Yes, indeed. That is why our legislation and law under the auspices of social development provides that in instances where there is a need that is within the policy, government of course will come to the party, as we have done since September when this tragedy happened. You will recall, Chriselda, that this is for the first time in our new democracy that the tragedy of this magnitude happened. So it is with reason and compassion that the whole nation has been showing the outpouring of this tragedy. And thanks to SABC and other media networks that have been broadcasting and conveying the message of the South African people in order to ensure that we sympathize and empathize with those 81 families who lost their loved ones.
Minister, I recall you saying everyone wants to know what really happened at the Synagogue Church of All Nations. Are we any clearer about what really happened when that building collapsed? I know that the South African Police Service, together with the other agencies that you spoke about who were in Nigeria, did South Africa at all in any way try to assist in an investigation into this? Or is there any clarity so many months later?
Well, as you know, this tragedy happened in Lagos, in the Synagogue Church for All Nations. And as a South African government, we have no direct role to play in the investigation. You'll recall that there is a coroner's inquest that is taking place in Lagos. We as a South African government, we've got our Consular General who has a watching brief there, not that we are directly involved. Obviously, we are keen to know that what actually happened in the tragedy. I'm sure the families of the loved ones also need to know, so that in the event that there is fault on anybody, then appropriate action must be taken so that those who are responsible can be brought to book.
Is there any indication from Nigeria on when some of these details will be made known? Certainly the families would want to know, to close the chapter, that their loved ones have returned and get some true answers about what happened.
So as I understand it, the process is still ongoing because not all witnesses have come forward before the coroner's inquest. So I'm sure as soon as all witnesses who can bring light into this tragedy, I'm sure the coroner's inquest will be proceeding very smoothly and also to conclude as a matter of urgency.
Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, thank you very much for your time this evening, giving details on that all 11 of the remaining South Africans indeed are returning to the country at about 11 o'clock or even 2 o'clock this morning. Certainly that would be great relief for the families who've been waiting for so long for their loved ones to come home and give some closure to this chapter, certainly. But we'll keep abreast of issues here at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. We'll be here as well once that plane lands, and stay tuned to the rest of our bulletins. We'll bring you all the latest from here.
Thanks for the update, Chriselda. That was our reporter Chriselda Lewis live from the Waterkloof Airbase in Pretoria.